we were discussing important business, and I was finding out what an intriguing, incredibly intriguing person you will be seeing today. And I'm not kidding, you know. You will see it in a few moments, but if you haven't read the message that we spread with the information about the upcoming lecture, you know, it just former Senator Chris Steineger represents local politics. He represents himself, obviously, but he represents something which we so rarely have an opportunity to see, encounter, touch, ask questions, state and local. Although he's had experience in Washington, yes, working in the office of Jim Slattery. Yes, sorry, there's so much information here. That's it. Jim Slattery. But then he was also a tax collector. Now, don't throw anything at him, but a tax collector, and with the Kansas City Department of Revenue. That's why, maybe that's the reason why he became, and I'm quoting from this, Steineger is a global traveler, and now a career opportunity for all of you. Before you become global travelers, you have to have his accomplishments. Yeah? So working for both parties, that's interesting. For both parties, you will probably hear a very proper Republican, but Senator Steineger began his career as a Democrat, then became disillusioned. Maybe he'll tell us why. And he will tell us, well, Ronald Reagan became disillusioned with the Democratic Party, and he made a switch, and didn't cost him much. So you can ask him later questions.
President.
So you can ask him whatever questions you wish about things which he will mention during the lecture, and he will talk about state and local politics. He will talk about campaign and what's happening this year and the state level, federal level. I'm absolutely sure that this will be very interesting. But let me read just a few more things from where he was, yes, because what he knows and what he has to say, his political ideology, he will tell you very soon here how Republican he is, although he has a pink tie, so he's
A little red.
a soft Republican.
Polish flag, red,
Polish
white,
flag.
you know, a little bit of black. Yeah, Polish flag, red.
Red and,
I know the pink.
and white, so with this goes for a part of it, but that's we are sensitive to pink in a very conservative country like Poland. Pink and is sensitive.
Pink is gay.
Yes, it is, and we love it, yes, but not everyone does. So, as a global traveler, Senator Steineger visited more than 40 countries doing what he will be doing for us today. That is, including Western and Eastern Europe, Middle East, Israel, Southeast Asia, China, Japan, Taiwan, India, the Caucasus region, he survived, and Cuba.
And Cuba.
That's interesting, yes?
It is.
How do you go to Cuba being an American politician from the Republican Party?
I was a Democrat.
Not from, you were a Democrat then. Well, but that's...
And I had a permit.
So he stayed in Japan, and I think comparing cultures, I think that's what he enjoys about traveling around the world, tasting different cultures, and then going back to Kansas, which is the heart of America. Yes. So what's wrong with Kansas? Yeah. That's a famous book. If you want to read about America, start with Kansas. Famous book about Kansas, and this is a book about average Americans. But this is not an average American. I think I spoke to him for 15 minutes, and I know that this is an extraordinary person who you will enjoy a lot listening to, and then asking questions. Make the best of the time which we have, an hour and 15 minutes, so take advantage of it. Senator, thank you very much for coming, and welcome to the American Studies.
Thank you for the invitation. And to me, it is hot in here, so I'd rather be wearing, tank top or flip-flops. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate your interest. Again, I'm Chris Steineger. I'm from Kansas City. which is directly in the center of the United States. You have California on this side, the eastern seaboard on that side, Chicago up here, Dallas and Texas, and Kansas City is directly in the middle. And it's a town of about a little over 1 million people. Typical American city. It's all based on the automobile. So, what's the population of Warsaw? 3 million? 5? 7? Okay. So Kansas City has 1/6 the population of Warsaw, but probably twice the size. It's all the American cities in the Midwest are just terribly spread out because the entire system is built on the automobile. You know, New York City, Chicago are compact. They have subways. You know, maybe a little bit of San Francisco, but most typical American cities were addicted, like drug addicts, to the automobile. We love automobiles. We have a giant highway system. So mine is a classic Midwestern American city. We have a very diverse economy. We have manufacturing. We have engineering. A lot of people think the Midwest is all agriculture, and Kansas is an agricultural state. And the state itself is, most of the land is used for farming, but most of the money comes from engineering, architecture, banking, insurance, we have a Ford factory making Ford pickup trucks. We have General Motors cars. We make Harley Davidson motorcycles. We make a lot of things. And so my town is very economically diverse. And right now it's doing very well. The economy is very good in Kansas City. So I always tell people I'm a lucky guy because I live in a great town that has a lot to offer, but the cost to live there is actually pretty cheap. The economy's good, and I'm a lucky guy. But I'm also lucky because I love to travel. My parents traveled a lot in the 1950s and 60s, and they inspired in me the desire to travel and see the world and experience foreign cultures. I've been in Poland, your country, 4 times. The first time was 1998. I was backpacking the Eastern European capitals, Budapest, and then Prague, and some other cities in the Czech Republic, and then we came directly to Krakow on the overnight train and stayed there a few days and visited Zakopane, and then came to Warsaw. And I never forget that first time coming out of the big Warsaw Central Station and looking out at the big Stalin building, or the gift of the Soviet people, that famous building. And I came out yesterday, 2 days ago, and it's the same exact scene, except there's all these new buildings everywhere. And you know, 98, there were like 10, 15, 20 cars. Now there's 200 or 300 cars, and they're all brand new cars. And Poland looks amazingly better than it did 1998. It's only 18 years, is that right? Yeah, 18 years, it's amazing transformation. And good, and it's amazing what you guys and your parents and grandparents have accomplished in 18 years. But I've been a second time. I was with a German exchange organization, a German academic exchange. I'm telling you about my ties to Poland, because you need to hear these things. And this was a German, it's the DAAD, German Academic Exchange Service, and they did this trip for American professors and public policy people to study issues about the EU enlargement. This was when the EU brought in all the Eastern countries. That was 2004, 2005. When was enlargement? 2004, 2005? So we did the study tour, and we visited 2 cities to compare their thinking and attitude about enlargement. This is a story about positive thinking. We went to Frankfurt on Oder in what was the old East Germany, and we visited Poznan in Poland. 24 hours in each place. You know, 10 or 15 American people and professors in public policy meeting with local leaders in these towns. So we go to Frankfurt on Oder, and we have 24 hours of meetings, and these Germans are all like, oh, I don't know, this might be bad, we might lose, this is probably going to be a bad thing for us, I think we'll be worse off. The next day we go to the Polish people, Poznan. You know, the 2 cities, they're the same. They're the same size, Central Europe, the same kind of food, the same kind of architecture, the same weather. We go to this place in Poznan, and these Polish people, this is going to be great, we're going to be better, we will succeed, we love this opportunity. And I come back now later, and it's exactly the power of positive thinking. Poland, the Poles are doing so much better. And it's good to have elected government. Yes, it's good to have a free market economy. The most powerful thing is the people. And the most powerful thing amongst people is if you have a positive thinking, you'll probably have a better chance to succeed. if you think you're going to lose, you'll probably lose, and it'll probably be worse. And it was so clear to me. I never forget that the Germans were all, oh, this is going to be bad and terrible. The Polish were all, this is going to be great and wonderful. I come back, and Poland is better and more wonderful than it was. So it's a lesson about the power of positive thinking. And if you guys are all students of American studies, one of the, a lot of people say America's great because, we have this democracy or we have freedom, and those are important things. The most powerful thing we have, we're a nation of mostly optimistic people who think optimistically, who think they can succeed if they try. Not that we're going to lose, so don't even try. Some of our people think that way. You're going to lose, don't even try. But we still have a majority of people who think, I can do better, I can succeed, I can move up if I try. And it's still a nation driven. The most powerful thing is not the law or the military or nuclear weapons. The most powerful thing is people and how they think. And our people for 250 years have been very forward thinking, not thinking about history. We're not thinking about, Poland used to be, from the Baltic to the Black Sea, that was 500 years ago. You can't change that, but you can change the future. Americans, we don't know history. We don't remember history very well. For good or for bad. For bad or for good. We don't remember because we're always focused on the future. It's not so much about what someone did 300 years ago. They did something bad to my great-great-great-great-grandfather. We instead we forget about Grandpa. He was a nice guy, but he's dead. We think about the future. We really do. It seems to be a difference between the Americans and the Europeans. We don't think so much about the past or what happened that we can't change. We think about the future, tomorrow, next week, next year. What can I change tomorrow to make me better? And it's a very kind of forward-thinking, positive energy way of thinking. And that's what, in my opinion, probably the thing that's made us a better nation. It's nice to have had a great constitution. It's nice to have been more or less protected from wars. But the biggest thing is just the power, the positive thinking of our people. And I would add to that creativity and innovation. The Americans are people that, I'll brag about it. I'm not modest. But we love to invent things. We love to create things. We love to innovate. We like the next new thing. That's why we always like if you have an iPhone 5 and the iPhone 6, screw this one. I want the iPhone 6. We always want the new trendy idea. The new restaurant is the new one we go to. And it's not to say things that are old are bad or old ideas are bad, but we like new ideas. We're very innovative, creative, and we embrace and encourage new ideas, new innovations all the time. Okay? And I think these are the most powerful things about America: innovation, creativity, and forward thinking about trying to make yourself better. And together, all this collective positive energy for 250 years has made, that's what's really built the country, is optimism, forward thinking, creativity, and innovation. That's what built America. Okay? It's not so much the Constitution was important, being kind of a big island with no major wars, that was important as well, but mostly driven by innovation, positive, forward thinking. Okay? Always remember that if you know nothing else about our country, that's probably the most important. That's our energy. It's not nuclear energy or cold energy or gas energy. It's human energy. All right. Professor has asked me to talk about the relationship of our federal government, our state government, and our local governments. Okay. It is another important distinction and difference between the American system and the European system or Asian or a lot of other places. We have 3 levels of government. We have the national government, which we call the federal government, or the folks in Washington. We have 50 state governments that are a step below in power. We have 50 states: California, Alaska, Florida, Kansas, New York, Oklahoma, Texas, et cetera, et cetera. We have 50 state governments. And below that, the bottom level is local government. This is cities, counties, and public school districts. Cities are like Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Dallas, but also many, many thousands of small cities of maybe only 5,000 or even only 500 people. Small villages are still considered a city. And we also have counties, which typically are rural areas. And then also in local government, we have something called public school district. In America, we have, I don't know, 5,000, 4,000 public school districts, something like this. They are not, in Warsaw, if Warsaw were an American city, there would probably be, I don't know, 20 or 25 public school districts. And each public school district has a local elected board of directors, elected from that local constituency. And these are normally, often they're just mothers and fathers of some of the school kids. Sometimes it's a local doctor who lives in that area. You must live in that school district. Sometimes it's local businessman, maybe local restaurant owner or local shop owner. But they stand for election to be elected to the board of directors of the local public school, and then they help to manage the public school. Okay? The same is true with our cities and counties. Doesn't matter if you're a small city of 500 or 5,000, or if you're mayor of New York City or Chicago. You must stand for election. Normally it's a 2 or 4 year term. Also, they will have a city council. So you have the mayor as the big boss, and a city council, anywhere from 4 to 6, 8, 10, 12 people. I think New York City is a huge city council, like maybe 40 or 50 of them. It's pretty crazy, but New York is big. And together they manage that city, the mayor, okay? Mayor and the city council. So we have national government in Washington, Barack Obama president, U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, and the U.S. Judiciary. We have 50 state governments. The 50 states each have their own, we have a national constitution, which I'll talk more about in a minute. Each of the 50 states also has a state constitution. Almost all of the state governments look very similar in structure, in architecture, to the national, they're very similar to the national government. At the national level, it's called the executive is called the president. At the state level, he or she is called governor. National president, state level, we call it governor. Other than that, it's basically all the same. At the national level, they have the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives. Together, they are known as the Congress. And then we also have the third branch, is the judicial branch. We call it the United States Supreme Court. You call it the tribunal? Tribunal, okay, national tribunal. So we have our national government is, we call it the three-way balance of power. You know balance beam? Yeah? Ours is three directions balance. The executive branch, which is the president, the legislative branch, which is the Congress, and the judicial branch, which is the U.S. Supreme Court. And they are equal in power. It was designed this way in 1776. Let me come back to that later. It was designed this way to prevent ever being taken over by a dictator or a king. We did not want any one of the branches of government. We did not want to be taken over by a king or a dictator. So they designed a government that would be almost impossible to be taken over by any one group. Okay? The 50 states also look the same. They have an executive branch called governor. They have legislative branch called state senate, which that's what I used to be, and also state representative. And they also have a state Supreme Court. So three-way balance of power. So the look on a management chart or an architectural chart, they look very similar. The 50 states look similar to federal government. And then the cities and counties and school districts have their own elected board of directors called mayor and city council. Let me talk about the writing of the U.S. Constitution in short, the short version. So this was written in 1776. It was written by a small group of wealthy white men, no ladies involved, no poor guys involved. And they wrote an amazing document. In 1776, there was no electricity, no trains, no cars, no iPhones. And if you read the American Constitution, it's really pretty simple. It's only about 10 pages. And it's very important what is in writing, what is written. It's very important what's in the Constitution in words. We say this explicitly stated. Explicitly stated. It's put in words in the Constitution. But if you really want to understand the American ideas of freedom, it's also important to understand what is not written, what is not stated. very important concept, or way to think about the American Constitution, and especially American freedom, and the way we think about freedom, the way we make civil Supreme Court decisions about freedom. What is written and what is not. So let me discuss this a minute. As an example, I'll give you two kind of examples. The first is there's a division of power between the federal government in Washington and the 50 states. Okay, going back to 1776, you know, America was, even then, was only 13 states on the eastern seaboard, only 13 colonies, but still a large territory. The fastest way you could communicate was by horse. If I want to go communicate with you, I have to hop on the horse and ride to your village. You know, that's how it was in 1776 in Pueblo. So the guys who wrote the Constitution, they understood we don't want a strong central government because the country is too big. You can't manage all this territory from our one capital. So we were already 13 colonies, and each colony wanted to be separate and manage their own affairs. So they came up with a system of a national government in one city, but that each state would have its own capital. And, really important here, guys, the division of power says the federal explicitly states, very important concept, there are certain powers reserved and held by the federal government, the national government. These are mostly duties about the border and outside of the border, dealing with foreign affairs, foreign treaties, also command of the U.S. military, and then the border is exclusively, that power is exclusively held by the national government of Washington. And all other powers are reserved for the states and the people. Never forget this division. It has changed over the years. Washington is more involved in domestic policy than ever before. But clearly in our Constitution, there are powers specified for Washington, explicitly stated for the national government. And it says, in one sentence, all other power is reserved for the states and the individuals. It doesn't say what powers or duties. It doesn't say what freedoms. What it basically means is all freedoms are reserved for state government and you, the individual. It doesn't say anything about Washington controlling your freedom. It really doesn't even say about the state. Like I said, it's important to read what's in writing, but also what is left completely wide open. Washington has specified powers. All other powers are reserved for the state and ultimately the individual. If you can think of the American Constitution beginning with that concept from 1776, you can better understand us today, how we think about guns, how we think about travel, how we think about gay marriage, how we think about many, many issues start with that basic concept. Is the American Constitution really has no restrictions about freedom. Let me give these, probably the two most important ones. The most important one is probably freedom of speech. It's the most discussed and fought over is freedom of speech. There are many other freedoms. Let's focus on this one. Speech can be thought. What is speech? Obviously, I'm speaking to you today. This is speech. But this also, a newspaper is also speech, but it's in written form. Television or a YouTube video is speech, but it's in video form. The Americans have defined speech very broadly and very openly over our 250 years. You know, it started out in 1776, they didn't have damn television or radio or the internet or YouTube. So speech was pretty well, it's speaking, and very rapidly it included newspapers. In the early days, newspapers, the early American newspapers in the 1700s and 1800s, they were full of lies, especially in political campaigns. They would make up all kinds of lies about candidates, and there was no way to disprove these things. And there was litigation and Supreme Court decisions that ultimately the newspapers and the media and the journalists can say almost anything they want to, because we have a very broad, open definition of speech. You can even basically kind of lie about people. But it's gone on, long in the late 1800s, comes radio. You can spread your message farther. With a newspaper, you're limited to how far can you carry the newspaper. Now with radio or television, you can broadcast, 50 or 100 miles. But speech has even become defined to include actions. So we started with speech, spoken speech, then written speech, newspapers, and then television, radio. The most famous case is flag burning. Have you guys talked about flag burning in the U.S.? Burning the American flag? That's kind of an American flag. During the American Vietnam War, the late 60s, early 70s, many young people were opposed to the war. And some of them, in their demonstrations, they burned the flag. This is considered by many people very bad, very unpatriotic, very anti-American, and especially members of the military. Members of the military are very patriotic guys. They would especially disagree with flag burning. And there was a very, very famous United States Supreme Court decision, and they decided that these guys that had burned the flag, burned the American flag, were expressing their opinion about the Vietnam War, that it was a form of speech, even though it was not spoken or written, it was a form of speech. So the U.S. Supreme Court decided that flag burning as an expression of political protest is speech. And so that's an example. We have a very broad definition of speech, and we have a very extremely strong commitment to freedom of speech. It's a very strong commitment because it's a very big commitment. You can even burn our flag and you are protected from the police because you are expressing freedom of speech. So I tell you this because, going back to that Constitution, it says, the federal government has certain limited powers of foreign affairs. Everything else is reserved to the states and the individuals. And it doesn't specify what the limits are. It says you can basically do anything. You can burn the damn flag, and you are protected because that is your freedom to do it. We Americans, we have problems. And sometimes people don't have as much freedom as they want. It's not a perfect freedom. But there is a very long history and commitment to basic ideas of freedom and individual liberty. It's not perfect. It's not as best as it could be. But I'm telling you these things so you understand the history of it, the constitutional history, and the societal history of it, okay? So that's kind of the basics are, I've told you two things now. One is about the federal, state, and local government relationship. The federal government is primarily responsible for things at the border and outside the border. And the states are primarily responsible for domestic affairs, funding of education, building the highways, making sure the restaurant and grocery store food is safe to eat. Agricultural management is mostly done at the state level. Now this power sharing, as we call it, has been evolving since the 1930s, especially since the 1970s. The federal government has slowly gotten more involved in domestic policy, partnerships, making partnerships with the 50 states to build highways and fund the schools and fund the universities and clean the environment, protect the environment especially. So there is much federal state cooperation and even federal cooperation with cities. But constitutionally, the federal government is actually limited in power to primarily foreign affairs. States are primarily responsible for domestic affairs, domestic policy. And I know that in Poland and many European countries, you have a national government in Poland has 16 provinces. 16? How many? 16, okay. And they have their own provincial, it's not called governor. Mayor, okay. Okay, of the local province. But I think, Marshall, the American states have relatively more power compared to any Polish province or any of the German states or the French. Our states are relatively more powerful and autonomous than anybody. Maybe the Australians come pretty close. Maybe the Canadians also. They have a relatively strong province form of government, the Australians and Canadians. But as I know it, the American states, the American federal-state relationship compared to any place else in the world, the state has almost as much power as the national government, especially on domestic affairs, okay, domestic policy. So I've told you about the federal-state relationship. I've told you a little bit about our beliefs about freedom. I haven't begun to really talk about freedom, but I gave you the really basic idea by discussing freedom of speech. And I would say one more thing about our Constitution. It is a living or evolving document. We have changed our Constitution. I understand right now in Poland there's talk about changing the Constitution. You know, this is not always a bad thing. It's nothing exactly to fear. It could be bad, but it also could be good. In the American experience, the Constitution was created in 1776, but there were many issues. Those wealthy white guys, they couldn't reach agreement. They couldn't make a compromise, so they held off a number of issues. They wrote the original Constitution, but within about 10 years, there was a second document called the Bill of Rights. It's called the Bill of Rights, but it was actually 10 amendments to the Constitution, 10 improvements to the Constitution. Some of these were very powerful, very much needed. Others were, kind of minor and boring. And then even after the Bill of Rights, for the first 40 or 50 years, there were a number of amendments added to the Constitution. In the past 100 years, there have been very few. It's become much more difficult to amend the Constitution, and it hasn't happened so often anymore. But it is considered a living document, and we even have a debate in our society amongst a few government people. You can be what's known as a strict constitutionalist, and you have a very limited definition, and then some people have more liberal, broader views, but it's probably too much to discuss today. So our Constitution also gets changed or modified. There's two ways, either by an amendment, which must be passed by Congress and 2/3 of the states. 27 states would have to ratify is the word. Congress cannot make the amendment themselves. They can propose it, but 2/3 of the states must ratify or accept. They must affirmatively vote yes to an amendment. And it's very, very, very difficult anymore because originally there were only 13 states. So 2/3 of 13 is what, 8? Kind of simple, kind of easy. Now there's 50 states, and 2/3 is 27. It's a lot more difficult to amend the Constitution. So we don't do it that way very often. We haven't done it much. The last one, I think it was 1948, if I remember correctly. But the other way is the U.S. Supreme Court. They cannot amend the Constitution. They cannot add more words. They cannot take away or delete any words. But what they can do is define what a word means. I talked about freedom of speech, that it now has been defined by the Supreme Court to include the act of flag burning. The Supreme Court made this decision. They did not change the words in the Constitution. They did not add words. They did not delete words. They expanded the definition of a word, and the word is speech. What is speech? Is it spoken word? Yes. Newspapers? Yes. Radio, TV? Yes. Burning the flag? Yes. So we change our Constitution in two ways: by amendment, which has become more difficult, by Supreme Court decision, which happens on a regular basis. Most of the changes, mostly when the Supreme Court makes a decision, the changes are actually very small and really, I cannot say they're inconsequential, but they're kind of small. However, when they made the decision about flag burning, that was just huge because it was kind of divisive. But that was in, I think in the 1970s, if I remember correctly. Okay? So, let's now talk about this year's election. I've given you an idea of federal, state, and local government, the structure. I've given you an idea of power sharing between the feds and the states. I've told you a little bit about our Constitution, about how it was designed, when it was designed, who designed it. and how it has been changed. And I've told you a little bit, a small tiny bit about how we Americans feel about freedom and how it has been defined, okay? So now let's talk about the elections. Let's come into modern history. So we have two people, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Let's talk about the Democrat side first. It's easier. The Democrat Party started with 3 candidates, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and Martin O'Malley. He is governor of Maryland, a small state on the east. And very quickly, you know, Martin O'Malley dropped out. He was never a really viable candidate. Pretty much everyone always knew that Hillary would probably be the nominee. And I'm sure that Hillary and Bill Clinton, as we call them, Billary, get it? Bill, Hillary, Billary. I'm sure that, because they're almost like 2 halves of one brain. I know they're separate people, but in some ways they're like, you know, right brain, left brain. They really are. I mean, there are certain comparisons. Have you guys watched the film House of Cards? Has anybody watched that? One? Only one? 2? Oh, okay, all right. There are certain comparisons between Bill and Hillary and Frank and Claire Underwood. I mean, there are. Let's talk about House of Cards later. It's a great film. And just I always watch it. I'm fascinated. I think, oh my God, are we that bad? Or are we going? If we're going that direction, I want to move now. Maybe told them. Not really good. And so the Clintons always thought this is going to be easy. Hillary will clearly, easily win the nomination and become president. They never believed that Bernie Sanders would do so well. I mean, she is still going to win the thing. She's going to win the primary. She's going to be the Democrat nominee. But Bernie Sanders has kept up with her the whole time. It's like a race between 2 horses. And the Clintons thought they would clearly win. And it's amazing how much Bernie Sanders has kept up with her. But I predict, you know, next week is the last big primary. It's California, June 6th. I think it's Monday. Next Monday is the California primary. It's a big state with a lot of population, it's a lot of votes, and clearly Hillary will win. They're polling close, but you know, I still say she wins the nomination. The Democrats have their convention in July in Philadelphia, and I predict that the Democrat Party will give Bernie Sanders the podium, and Bernie Sanders will say, you know, I fought for my beliefs that the Wall Street banks are too big and too powerful and they need more regulation, and I fought for my beliefs that we need free university for the students, and I fought for my beliefs that we need universal health insurance for all citizens. And I know those are beliefs that you also share with me. And the audience was like, yeah. And he said, but it has come to the point that I must endorse my competitor, Hillary Clinton. Yeah. And so I believe she will work to carry these good values all the way to Washington. And I encourage all my followers to endorse Hillary Clinton. Yay! And we must unite the Democrat Party to defeat the evil Donald Trump. Yay! So the Democrats are all good. I used to be a Democrat. I know how they think. They're all going to unite much easier than the Republicans will. They're going to unite really strongly in July. If for no other reason because they hate Donald Trump. And they think they can beat him. And they're probably almost wrong if they're thinking that he's going to be tough to beat. So that's the Democrat side. And we'll come back to Hillary Clinton's weaknesses, because she does have substantial weaknesses. She has strengths and weaknesses just like any other politician. The Republicans, we started out 1 year ago with 15 candidates. And you know, the norm is to have 3 or 4 candidates for president in the primary for your political party. We had 15. That's a crazy large number. And some of these guys never had a chance. They were just running for president. They were going to run for president. You know, 3 or 4 months. I've got my name. I'm getting some publicity. But you know, I know I'm never going to win. But you know, Jeb Bush might win. So I'm going to run for president for 3 or 4 months, and then I'm going to drop out and I'm going to, you know, support Jeb Bush, or I'm going to drop out and I'll support Ted Cruz. Some of these guys were just playing to get some favor or some power after the election if their buddy, the guy they endorse, wins the election, okay? But it narrowed down to about 5 viable candidates: Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, who I just hate the guy, And John Kasich stuck in there for a long time. And Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush was the moderate candidate. Ted Cruz was definitely the more social conservative candidate. I was supporting Marco Rubio for a lot of reasons. I thought he had a good, he worked in city government, he was elected in state government, then he made it to the US Senate. I like the fact that he's Hispanic. You know, the Republicans are thought of as the party of the old white guys, and I disagree with that. I think we should be the party of anybody that wants to be part of us. And I thought it would be good if we had a brown-skinned man as our candidate, but, you know, Marco dropped out, so we move on. I also liked John Kasich. I just don't like Ted Cruz. I think the guy has no resume. And I think he's a very good speaker. I just think he's just, I don't like him. But he'll probably, if Trump wins, Cruz will have some position in the government. I'm sure of that. Just the way it is. Trump originally, you know, a year ago, no one thought Trump had a chance. We thought, if you're a moderate Republican, you're probably supporting Jeb Bush. If you're a conservative Republican, social conservative, they were kind of divided. The majority ultimately went for Ted Cruz, but some of them went for other people. But bit by bit, as some of these guys dropped out, it kind of solidified. More or less, Ted Cruz was getting the social conservatives. The moderates were just too small. But there are some other factions out there. There's the old Tea Party vote. There's no actual political party called, they just have this name, Tea Party, even though they're not a party. They're not legally or officially a party. But Trump was able to get some of the Tea Party guys, a few of the social conservatives, but what he really got was the white working class male, okay? In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, working class white men all voted Democrat, okay? That was a legacy of the 1930s, Franklin Roosevelt, the New Deal, labor unions, many of these things. The working class white guys voted Democratic for about 50 years. With the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980, the working class whites that year in 80, they voted Republican because they liked Reagan. When Clinton came along, they went back Democratic. But now they seem to have gone for Trump. This is a group, again, 50 years they voted Democrat. They started moving to the right, moving more to the conservative side of things since Reagan. And Trump has been able to gather these guys into his group, along with the Tea Party people and some of the social conservatives. And that's essentially how he has won. The Republican Party, when I first got elected in 1996, I was a Democrat back then, but basically the moderate Republicans were the majority faction, and the social conservatives were the minority faction. Over the past 20 years, it's switched. The social conservatives have taken over the Republican Party, and the moderates are the smaller portion. So, so to win the primary, you need at least some of the social conservatives to win. It depends on, if you're running at the state level, it depends on what state, what city, where you're at. Some places are more socially conservative, some are more moderate. But on the national level, the social conservatives are slightly a majority. But the Tea Party guys, they're not, let me define social conservative. The social conservatives in America, also known as the Christian conservatives, they are absolutely opposed to abortion, and they are absolutely opposed to gay marriage, okay, or same-sex marriage. These are their top two issues. They're also for some of the same issues as the moderates: lower taxes, less regulations, smaller government, skeptical of labor unions, but they're explicitly adamant opposed to abortion and opposed to gay marriage. Okay, so they're more religious orientation, I guess, like your Law and Justice Party here, as I understand it. So Trump was able to get a few of these people, but you know what? Trump, I don't think he's a social conservative. I think he's not exactly moderate, but he's more like a center, I call him center-right candidate. You know, Trump is 69 years old. He's been living in New York City 69 years. I've been in New York City many times. I love New York. It's a cool city. It's the city of the world. People from every part of the world are in New York. Any kind of food you want is in New York City. You cannot live 69 years. years in New York City and be a social conservative. It is impossible to be both. And, so Trump, I think he's very carefully tried to say things just in a way that some of the social conservatives accept him, but not really being outwardly, openly against for more regulation of abortion. Maybe he's for status quo on abortion, but I really don't think he wants to ban. He does not. I don't think he would support government banning abortion. And I don't think he would support the federal government banning gay marriage either. So I think he's been very, shall we say, secretive, maybe, about his views on social issues. But it was amazing to me, because I've always thought this about him, but there was some video where he was with a bunch of fundamentalist church ministers, Catholic and Baptist, and they're all like, it's on YouTube, and it's one of those kind of really funky religious things where they're all like, touching each other, and like they're all with their eyes closed. And there's a picture of Donald, and these guys are all like blessing him. And it's kind of, for me, that's kind of weird, But anyway, and for whatever reason, it worked. So he's going to be our nominee. All right, let's talk about, we've talked about how Hillary got to where she's at, how Donald got to where he's at. Let's talk about the future, the next 5 months, and each of their strengths and weaknesses. Hillary, the Clintons have been involved in public life for 30 years, since he was governor of Arkansas and then president 1992, starting for 2 terms. We, the American people, we know everything there is to know about Hillary Clinton. We know what clothes she wears. We know what car she drives. We know where she stands on every issue. Between her and her husband, they've been in public life 30 years. We know all the good things. We know all the bad things. We know everything about these people. Real important thing I'm about to say. The polling right now shows her only about 39% of the voters are saying they'll vote for Hillary. 39, 40%, 38%, something like that, but not much over 40%. Really important thing I'm going to tell you about American politics. I learned this a long time ago. If you have been in public office a long time, 5, 10, 15 years, let alone 25 or 30, if you've been in public office a long time, and it comes to the election year, so you've had a long time for the people to get to know you and form an opinion about you as the candidate. You've got a long time to prove yourself. If you've been in office 10, 15, 20 years, and you're still only polling 40% in the election, you're in trouble. You should be 50%, 60%. If you've been doing a good job for 10 or 15, 20 years, and those people like you, you should be polling 50 or 60%. She's at 39. She's in trouble. She can change this, but that's a very telling fact right now. This poll, I've seen this poll for about 6 weeks now. Now, a lot can change in the next 5 months. But since about 6 weeks ago, it became pretty clear that Hillary would be the nominee and Trump would be the nominee. And I've been watching this polling for about 6 weeks, and she has stayed at about 39%, despite being in public life all this time. Trump has been moving up. It's amazing. This guy's amazing because the more the media just beats up, they talk about all his marriages. He's been married 3 times. He's had casinos that have gone bankrupt. He's made, frankly, some less than polite remarks about occasional minorities. He's talked about other men's wives. Hey, she's got nice legs. Don't you all agree? That's not what you talk about when you're running. You don't talk about somebody's wife's legs or boobs or something like that. But he has, and it's kind of crude, but his poll numbers have gone up. And just the media points this out. They beat up on him all the time, and his poll numbers go up. It's amazing. A lot of us that have been in politics a long time is like, how does this guy do this? How is this possible? But it's obviously happening. So right now the polls are about equal. He has been moving up for the past 6 weeks. She's held steady at 39%. Right now they're both about 39%. All this can change. I'm just saying, as of right now, these 2 people are tied. Here we have Hillary Clinton. She was secretary. I'm a Republican, but I also respect my opponent. I'm kind of like if you're playing football. Football. You don't. If you're the top football team, you don't trash talk the other team. You're like, yeah, these guys are good. We have to study how they play because we're playing these guys next Sunday or Saturday. We need to know these are a respectable team. That's how I think about politics. I don't trash the other guys. I respect them. I view them as my competitors. I want to know what they're good at, what they're bad at, what their strength, what their weakness is. Hillary Clinton's a smart, she's a well-educated woman with good experience. I don't think she was a bad Secretary of State, maybe not the greatest, but not the worst. Bill Clinton's a smart guy. You put both halves of the brain together. These people are formidable. Bill is a really good kid. Hillary is kind of just so-so campaigner. She doesn't have the charisma. Bill had a lot of charisma. I didn't meet him, but I was in a small room one time when he was giving a speech to a bunch of Democrats, and the guy, it was a room of maybe 400 people, but still small. And he was on stage, like no Secret Service, nothing. He was this close to the audience. And the guy everybody in the room was like, just listening to every letter of every word. But Hillary doesn't have that. She's not stupid, she just doesn't have charisma. And the two weaknesses for Hillary, one is this idea that she's not trustworthy, and the other is the Clinton wealth that they've accumulated. So trustworthy, I personally, once again, I'm differing from my Republican colleagues. I think it's kind of, I don't think she's untrustworthy, but the Clintons, all the way back to when they were in Arkansas, they've had some business dealings that were never exactly illegal. They just seemed a little not good. They seemed a little dirty or messy or maybe not illegal, but not quite legal either. They've never been found guilty, but some stuff way back when. And even here lately, we call it email gate. So when you work for the State Department, you're required to use the official State Department email. Well, she didn't. She also used when she was Secretary of State, she used private email to discuss government issues, and that's against the regulations. In my opinion, it's really kind of a minor thing. So what? But she did that, and recently was found to have broken the rules. And the Republicans are going to make a huge deal about this. Oh, she broke the rules. She was Secretary of State, she broke the rules. The other one was in Benghazi, in Libya. The U.S. consulate office was attacked in the middle of the night by some Muslim radical guys. The U.S. ambassador died. And the Republicans are blaming that on her. And they're saying Hillary was in charge. She was Secretary of State. She should have known the attack was going to happen and should have had the Marines and Army there to protect the ambassador. And look, the ambassador died because of her incompetence. You know what, honestly, these surprise attacks can happen anywhere, anytime. It doesn't matter who's Secretary of State. These guys attacked. It was a surprise attack in the middle of the night. It's unfortunate our ambassador died, but I personally don't think she could have stopped this thing, but the Republicans are making a big deal about it. So there's this idea that the polling shows that a lot of people think she's untrustworthy. But the other big one is this money. They made a bunch of money legally. So they have this Clinton Foundation, okay? Every American president ex-president has a foundation. Reagan has one, Jimmy Carter has one, George Bush, second George Bush, they all have a foundation. There's nothing, normally they raise 20 million, 50 million, something like this. They build a library and they put all of your presidential papers and records and books and memorabilia it's almost like a museum, okay? President Jimmy Carter has a foundation. They go abroad with Habitat for Humanity. You guys know this? It's an NGO. They build houses for poor people in poor countries, okay? That's what Jimmy Carter does with his foundation. I don't know what Bush does with his. The Clintons, when Clinton got out of office, out of his second term, they weren't poor, but they weren't rich either. Clinton was then a private citizen, just like me. There's no law prohibiting him from, if he wanted to, he could go work for a big company. If he wanted to, he could manage an NGO. There's no law in America specifying what the ex-president can or cannot do. Tradition is you don't take another job, you retire, you become elder statesman, and but you don't take a job in the private sector and this type of thing. That's just tradition. There's no law. What Clinton did, he went on the speech lecture tour. He went around the world for quite a few years giving speeches. 1 hour, 30-minute speech, $1 million. Is $1 million a lot to anyone, to a Polish person? That's a lot of money to an American. $1 million a speech for 30 minutes. And he gave a bunch of speeches, several hundred speeches. And they put this money into their foundation, which is all legal. It's all legal. There's nothing illegal about what they did. By law, they cannot use that money from the foundation. They cannot use that money for their sale. They can't buy a Ferrari. They can't buy new shoes or new clothing. But they can spend the money on travel. They can promote the foundation. So if you want to promote the foundation, you have to travel. You need to go to Warsaw. You need to go to Switzerland. You need to go to this forum and that, the Davos forum. You need to go so you can pay for your travel. You can pay for your hotel. And in doing that, you need assistance. You need 10 or 15 staff people to help you, to manage your Facebook account, to manage your social media, so you can hire all these people from your foundation. And you need taxi service, and you need nice restaurants. You need to have entertainment budget. So the Clintons, they can't legally just outright take the money and buy a Ferrari or buy new shoes, but they can live a good life using the foundation money, okay? And it's not against the law. None of this is against the law, but it is not, by the American people, it's just not the right thing to do. You're not supposed to do that as ex-president. You're supposed to kind of quietly, you've had your time, you quietly go away, then you're the elder statesman, and you do some nice things for charity. But the Clintons have used it to make several $100 million. Several $100 million. Even Hillary was giving speeches. She only got maybe $100,000 a speech. Even their daughter, Chelsea, went on the lecture speech tour. In fact, she was in my hometown, Kansas City, last summer. You can see this on YouTube, her speech. She came to a women's empowerment conference in Kansas City. 14-minute speech. I've watched it. And she really doesn't say a whole lot. It's not even really inspiring. $60,000 for 14 minutes. So it's not illegal. Not illegal. So it's just that the American people, it's not what you're supposed to do if you're ex-president. You're supposed to be humble and quiet and go away and live. You get the pension's like $200,000 a year plus Secret Service plus others. $200,000 a year, I can live pretty well on that. How about you guys? That's what you're supposed to do if you're ex-president. But the Clintons kind of did it the other way around. They made themselves essentially wealthy. And so that's going to come back to haunt Hillary in the campaign. That'll be used. It's not illegal, but it's just not what you're supposed to do. Donald Trump. He has been a public figure in America for about 20 years. Almost, not nationwide, not nationally like the Clintons, but within New York City and sometimes on talk television. We know the name Donald Trump. He has casinos, he has hotels, he's a billionaire. Some billionaires, they don't want anybody to know who they are. Donald Trump wants everybody to know who he is. He's got his own airplane, and he'll tell you, he has 5 jets, and he wants you to know this. He's got Trump painted on the side. He has Trump Tower and Trump Hotel and and he puts his name on all this stuff. He's very, well, we can say it, arrogant. He's also successful, but he's a very extroverted, not introverted. He's a very extroverted person, and he knows it, and he's good at this kind of a thing. He's a good talker. Some in the media, he's not a fascist, he's not Hitler, the media exaggerates things, and he's not stupid. He approaches this very differently than all the traditional politicians. And I'll say one other thing right now that's remind me to come back to the Washington insiders. Let me finish on Trump. So Trump, we do know some things about him. We know he's got casinos. We know he's a billionaire. He reminds us all the time. He's not modest at all. We know he's been married a couple of times. His current wife is Eastern Europe. She's from Slovenia. She's never on TV a whole lot. She never speaks on TV. She's very nice looking, which is a model, ex-model. So she's nice looking, but when she speaks, she's got a very strong, kind of Slavic accent. Which Americans are sort of okay, but also like, more of an American accent would be better. But, so their family is it's just so crazy. This billionaire guy is now a very legitimate candidate for president. I mean, the guy can win. Just a lot of us that are longtime political observers just would never thought this would happen. But now it is, and this is what we're going to go with. So I told you Hillary Clinton's been around 25 years, and we know everything about her. Donald Trump's been around a lot of years, and we don't know everything about him. I mean, we know about his wealth and his casinos and his wives. We know, but we don't know so much about where he stands on the issues. We don't really know much about his stance on environmental policy. He did give an energy policy speech a couple of weeks ago. He's spoken a little bit on foreign affairs, not much. He really hasn't made many talks about where he stands on issues. And there's nothing exactly wrong with this, but we don't know that much about him. But as I said earlier, the polling already 39% say they'll vote for the guy, and they don't even know where he stands on all the issues. That's also kind of a crazy thing for us political observers. We don't even know where the guy stands, and he's already getting 39%. So that's his weaknesses. He has a great ability to talk without saying anything. He has a great ability to just, even the political media, journalists that follow politics, even these guys, we say throw bricks, you know, you throw a brick at someone, they throw bricks at him, and the bricks just bounce off. He's able to he's a very unique ability to deal with the media. And right now in America, so let me talk about the Americans are opposed to what's going on in Washington. We're also we're skeptical about Washington, and we're also skeptical about the national media. Because this is maybe the biggest dividing issue between the two candidates, and it may be the biggest decision, maybe the biggest issue that Americans make their decision on. Are you an insider to Washington? Are you part of Washington? Or are you on the outside and you're disgusted with Washington? The majority of Americans right now are really disgusted, disappointed, disenfranchised with Washington, D.C. Our national government, the politicians, the bureaucrats, the lobby, all the special lobbyists. It's like they've taken over. This is our wonderful capital, and these people have taken it from us. They're running our government. Basically, they're making money for themselves. They make a bunch of regulations. The rest of us, the other 99% must live with all these regulations and all these laws and pay all these taxes. And this 1% that lives in Washington that controls everything, they're the ones getting rich. You know, they like things just the way they are. The other 99% of us are kind of disgusted with it all. And I won't say that the other 99%, but a majority of Americans in public opinion polls, really for a couple of years now, a majority of Americans, solid majority, I don't know, 55, 65%, are pretty disgusted and disappointed with anything to do with Washington. Bureaucrats, politicians, lobbyists, taxes, spending, all of it's bad. That's kind of how your typical American, not the elites in Washington, but the typical person on the street, that's kind of what they think. Trump and Sanders have tapped onto this. The Sanders voters are liberal lefties disgusted with Washington politics. Many of the Trump conservatives are conservative, right-wing leaning people disgusted with things going on in Washington, D.C. So this disgust, distrust, anger, disappointment, it's across the political spectrum amongst the American people. The average typical American has at least some disgust, disappointment, or even a whole bunch of disgust, disappointment, distrust with anything to do with Washington. The bureaucrats, the lobbyists, all of it's bad. It's kind of how they're all frustrated. And Trump is, you know, Hillary's going to win the Democrat nomination, but she is not the candidate of those that are, even though they'll have to vote for her, but they're going to be not so enthusiastic. The liberals disgusted, the Bernie Sanders people. Trump is doing a better job because the Republican Party has always said, we are the party of less government, less regulations, you know, even though, frankly, the Republicans have not done a very good job. They're actually almost as bad as the Democrats. But at least they officially say that they're for limited government, lower taxes, less spending, smaller bureaucracy. And Trump has, you know, brought in the working class white guys, the Tea Party. He's kind of brought them over to the Republican side, you know, this guy can win. So that's kind of the status. I think if I were a Democrat operative and I wanted to hit Trump and you know, put a bullet through his head kind of a thing, you guys should. There's a very famous 1964 presidential campaign, Lyndon Johnson versus Barry Goldwater. Lyndon Johnson became president. But there's a television commercial. It's called the Daisy commercial. You can find it on YouTube. Just type in YouTube 1964 Daisy. Anybody seen it? You have. Okay. And it's like a 15-second, 20-second commercial, maybe 30 seconds. But it's a side of the presidential election that year. That was the time of the Cold War. You know, the Cold War. At that time in America, people really believed that we would have nuclear war with Russia eventually. So nuclear war was a very scary thing for American people. So in 1964, the Democrats did this commercial against Barry Goldwater. Was this conservative guy. He was, you know, in favor of bombing and, you know, stopping communism and using the military and, you know, and the majority of the American people probably did not. None of us wanted war. We definitely didn't want nuclear war. So the Democrats did this commercial called Daisy. It's a little girl, like a 6-year-old girl, and she has a flower, and she's pulling the petals off the flower. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it comes this large male voice. 9, 8, 7, 6, and then a rocket launches an nuclear explosion. So a little girl with a flower becomes a nuclear explosion, i.e. death, destruction. And then it's Lyndon Johnson's voice, and I can't remember the quote, but he says, "These are difficult times that we live in." He doesn't say anything about nuclear war, but he says, "We cannot make rash decisions." You need to watch it, but he says this quote that he never says, "I'm Lyndon Johnson" or "vote for," he never says Barry Goldwater. But it's very clear, the message is, if you let Barry Goldwater, we'll have nuclear war. And you need to watch it. And this is the one thing I think the Democrats maybe, if I were them, that's what I would try and do. Trump is obviously well known for making all kinds of brash, rash statements. You know, he's not a, he doesn't always think before he talks, he just talks quickly. And he hasn't said anything really about bombs or war, but he does make these kind of judgmental, angry, he's got even his face. Trump does not have, he's got kind of an angry looking face. He doesn't have a happy face. Neither does Hillary, but he has a face that tends to look a little bit angry. And they'll make a video of him with some of his remarks, and they'll try and create the idea that if you vote for this guy, we'll have war with Korea or Russia or something. They'll try and recreate the Daisy commercial in a modern way. This is the way I think they could damage Trump. And you know, maybe there's other ways to damage him and stop him. But I think that's his greatest weakness, is that they'll paint him as a crazy guy that is incompetent or crazy enough that he'll start a war with somebody. So I've been talking for about an hour, I think. I've told you, let's do a quick recap. We talked about the federal, state, local government, 3 layers of government. We talked about the relationship, the power sharing between federal and state, how it's in our Constitution. Federal government responsible for everything, foreign affairs. States responsible for everything, domestic affairs. But now they actually share power on domestic affairs. I talked about how Americans approach, I talked about the design, the original designers, the writers, drafters of the Constitution, the wealthy white guys. I talked about a little bit about how we approach freedom by talking about freedom of speech. And I've told you a little bit about the two two parties and where they were a year ago and how they are now. And I've told you a little bit about the 2 candidates and what might happen over the next 5 months. So I'm going to take a drink of water, and I think you guys need to start asking questions. So who will be first? Yes, sir.
I want your opinion on what would, thought experiment, what will happen to America if Donald Trump wins versus if Hillary Clinton wins?
It's kind of a big, wide, what will happen with America? Well, First off, the Democrats will be very sad. Hillary Clinton will be very disappointed, and the Republicans will be happy. You know, I forgot a major thing to tell you guys. So it's not just that we're electing president. We're also the entire U.S. representatives, the Congress, not all the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate, they have staggered term. Some of those guys are up for election. All of the 435 United States representatives, all of them have 2-year terms. All of them stand for election this November. So, Polish friends, the day after American election, you'll see who is our president. If you really want to know, also look at who controls the Congress, which party, Democrat or Republican controls. Right now, Republicans control the Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. So look at who controls those 2 chambers, because that's really just as important as who is president. President is the most important, but control of the Congress is also. So the day after the election, you should look at the Polish newspaper and read who won control of Congress and the United States Senate. And then below that, look at it will take another week or so, maybe that even the next day. Look at the 50 states. Not all of many governors are up for election this year, not all of them. And also the state legislature, many state senators are up for election. All state representatives in the country are up for election this year. And what's really cool is usually CNN will do it, but also the newspaper USA Today, they make a color chart. Red and blue, we like to use red and blue. And it's good to see red and blue between the federal level, president, and the U.S. House and U.S. Senate. But look at the state with the 50 states when you're doing your research there. Which states went more red and which went more blue? And the big thing is all 50 states, they've been going more Republican the past 20 years. All 50, not all of them, not California, not Boston or Massachusetts, but a majority of the states now have Republican governors and a Republican majority state legislature, okay? In the 1950s, 1960s, they were majority Democrat. Since the 90s, they've been going slowly more Republican. So look for this the day after election. Not just who's the president, who controls the U.S. Senate, and also who controls the states. So back to your question, how will America change? In some ways, not that much. Let me give it, do you guys, 3 years ago in 2013, there was something called the government shutdown. The Washington government could not make a budget. So, America is not just the damn government. The government is like 2% of who we are as a people. Government, hell, all the restaurants are still going for, all the private sector, which is most of Americans make their living from the private sector. The day after the election, every farmer will still go work on his farm. Every factory worker will still go work in his factory. Everyone at McDonald's still goes to work at McDonald's. The day after the election, most of America is like, okay, Republicans won, time to go to work. So many things won't change at all. Okay? But the direction of politics will change a little more right, a little bit more left. I don't know which. But the government will change. The global media, all of them will talk about this for weeks and weeks, and they'll speculate. Well, Donald Trump won, so does this mean it's going to be nuclear war with Russia? I don't know. What do you think? Mr. Expert, you're an expert on Russian. Will the Americans start a war with? I don't know. Then they get all, the television guys are the worst. They get, it's like, you guys know, 2 weeks ago there was a plane going from Paris to Egypt, crashed in the Mediterranean. It's a sad story. But what I hate about the media, immediately that day, before they even know that, okay, the plane crashed, they're interviewing experts. Mr. Expert, did the plane, when it was crashing, did it crash to the left or to the right? What do you think? We don't know yet. We have to investigate. Does it really matter if it went left or right before? Mrs. Expert, the plane was, where they had to have their dinner before they crashed. Did they die with, I don't know. The restaurant served the food. They ask all these experts stupid questions that it's too soon to know. And I guarantee you, the day after the election, and the week, a month after the election, They're going to have all the global media, all of them are going to have all their experts, and they're all going to make speculation. What will happen? Why? Maybe this might, maybe that might happen. Well, maybe it turns blue, maybe it becomes green. I don't know. I'm kind of disgusted with the global media. They're just, they talk so much stuff with really very little substance. A lot of talk, very little substance. You know, but America won't change that much. You know, we're still, with the election of a new political party, all will still go to work. We'll still, you know, for Americans, it all really comes down to the number one issue for all of us really boils down to our own personal well-being. My father used to say, Americans vote for their pocketbook. You know, they vote for their wallet, their own economic well-being. And that's, they'll get up the next day and, okay, the other guys won, or my guy won, but time to go to work. They gotta go to work, you know, gotta go to their jobs so they can make money, so they can buy more stuff. So, not that much will really change immediately, but over time, new policies will be made. So the big answer to your question. He was next, and then you.
Yes. Why did you switch to Republicans?
Why did I switch to Republican? I started out as a Democrat, actually fairly liberal. There are many, many reasons, but it really boils down to I'm with the people that think Washington doesn't work so. Truly, our American government just isn't able to get stuff done much anymore. And it's not just because the two political parties are fighting. I've been a bureaucrat. I have friends that are bureaucrats. The bureaucracy has gotten worse. You know, it used to be they had one bureaucrat to, you know, I don't know, any job they used to have one. Now they have 3 bureaucrats and 1 boss. It's, you know, they made a joke about communism. How's it go? Everyone has a job, but nobody works. I know the Germans told me this. Everyone has a job, but nobody works. Our bureaucracy is slowly going that. Even they all 5, you know, pencil, you know, old pencil, sharpen the pencil. So they had one guy to sharpen the pencil, a second guy to measure the pencil, a third guy to be the boss. And the bureaucracy is getting worse and worse about this. And many of the government programs they just don't work so well. My biggest program that I hate is social welfare. We in America define, in Europe I think you define social welfare bigger. You include health insurance and also retirement pension. In America, retirement pension is considered separate from social, it's different. And health insurance is considered separate. Social welfare in America is when we give money to poor people and housing and food so they are not living on the street, okay? And we've done this now 5 generations. And it's usually a Democrat program. Republicans generally are skeptical. And I represented a poor area with a lot of social welfare. And I guess over the years I realized this just doesn't work at all. You know, we have now in my country 5 generations of people. You're on social welfare. Your mother was, her mother was, and her mother was. And this whole family, 5, I'm sorry, I'm not picking on you, but 5 generations, and these people don't know how to have a job. They don't know how to go to school. They don't even know how to cook food. They only can buy food from McDonald's or from a box. They're really quite stupid. They're not educated. They almost cannot. We have schools, they won't go to school. We have teachers, they don't want to learn. We've created this, I call it the welfare underclass of these people that just, you know, they're alive. We're keeping them alive with a little bit of food, a small, shitty apartment, and, you know, and we keep them alive, and that's about it. And I think it's an ultra colossal failure for my country. We just don't do it very well. For some reason, it just doesn't. Social welfare does not work in America. We fail miserably. And the Democrat Party just can't accept it. Oh no, we need to give more money to these people. We need better housing. We need to give more to the poor. It just doesn't work. I've watched it 5 generations. The area I represented in Kansas City was kind of poor. It had working class, small middle class, and a bunch of poor people. You know, I lived there all my life, and I've watched this happen. I've watched people. A girl I knew in junior, I was like 9th grade. I kind of liked this girl. 9th grades were like 13 or 14. And she got, not me, but she got pregnant at 14 or 15, dropped out of school. By the time she's 30, her daughter had a baby. Now she's like great-grandmother. And it was, you know, I always thought of it because I knew her and I kind of liked her. And, you know, she wasn't stupid, but somehow and her whole family, just none of them ever, they all live on public assistance, they, can't keep jobs. And that's just one, but I've seen this happen so much. And the Democrats if a government program doesn't work very well or ineffective or fails, the Democrat, their only solution is, we just have to give more money. If we spend more money, it'll be better. Well, no, it won't. Sometimes this idea, this program, it's a bad idea. Do any of you guys remember telephone? Maybe your grandfather, you pick up the phone and you dial. Do you use that phone anymore? We all use this. So to me, government programs are like technology. Okay, this phone in the 1950s, okay, that's a good phone in 1955 or 1960. Today, it's an old junk phone. It's shit. We don't want that. It doesn't work anymore. It's not good enough. I feel the same way about government programs. They can always be made better. I'm a typical American. I'm not about protecting history or keeping the old stuff. I'm about the new stuff. I want the new ideas. The Democrats are not innovative. They want to keep trying these same programs that don't work anymore. Their solution is always spend more money, spend more money. And the Republicans, they're not great. They're not that much better, but at least they officially question the size of government. They acknowledge that many programs don't work. Even if they've not been able to fix these, at least they say it. The Democrats don't even say it. This is probably the biggest reason I switched parties. I'm one of the ones, I've been an insider, a lot of these things just don't work very well. Why give more money? Reform it, make it better, and that's what the Republicans talk about. This lady.
Well, my question was kind of covered by you in this answer, but I want to a bit argue with you, sir.
Please.
Because I think a solution for people who are on welfare to get back on track is to raise the minimum wage. But I don't think a Republican Party is kind of a proponent of this idea. And I wonder whether was it necessary to switch parties in order to fight with the welfare kind of ideas. And I think that you could have stayed in the Democratic Party and encourage your colleagues to maybe a bit change their views or a bit, switch their focus on the minimum wage raise or, any other solution than supporting the people who are from first generations of the welfare. So I think there are kind of other ways to solve the problem, not necessarily change the party, but...
Certainly, Bill Clinton once famously said the best welfare reform is a good job. Get people into jobs and then they're not on welfare. That is conceptually a good idea. The minimum wage idea, it just doesn't work. It's so simple. Right now in Kansas City, I think the minimum wage is $8 or $10 an hour, something like this. But in reality, you can't, I have a company, I have a bunch of apartments and houses I renovate. You can't hire anybody for less than $15 an hour. Maybe McDonald's gets people for about $8 or $9 an hour. But in simple construction, you must pay $15 an hour minimum or they won't come to work. My wife and I hire someone to come clean our house. Cleaning a house is considered very simple work. In fact, they're Mexican people that clean our. We pay them more than $15 an hour. We pay a fixed amount, like $90 per time, but they get it done in 2 hours, 3 people, so they're making like $18, $20 an hour to clean a house. But the difference is they want to work. And in America, we've created this class of people, the social welfare class. They don't want to, and they don't even know how to work. To work, well, you have to get out of bed. Yeah, that sounds simple, but for some of these guys, they can't even get out. I just couldn't get out of bed today, Well, you have to dress cleanly. They just basic concepts of how to manage yourself. We have created this welfare class where the only expectation is, we give them some food and some free apartment, and there's no expectations for behavior. You can offer them, the public schools are free, but they won't go to school. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to learn with those people. I don't want to go. It's free. I can give you free. If you won't take it, what good is it? We have a job in Kansas City right now. We have jobs every day. They won't take the job. We have simple jobs. Anybody can work at McDonald's. They wouldn't even go to them. About 2 years ago, I'll give you a personal example, like the girl I knew who got pregnant. So I have a bunch of these houses and apartments, you know, in the fall, all the leaves come off the trees. You have to rake the leaves up, you know. We call it raking the leaves. This is very simple work. Usually like teenage boys or children do it. So I knew this woman, she had a 19-year-old son. He graduated from high school at age 18. For 9 months, no job, doesn't go to college. She says, yeah, he just stays home and plays video games. I said, okay. I need someone to come rake leaves and, you know, just clean up in my yard. I'll give him $15. Sorry. She said, yeah, he's thinking about going to McDonald's and getting a job. McDonald's is like 300 meters. Can you walk 300 meters? Anybody can walk 300 meters. But you know, the mom says, yeah, he's maybe getting a McDonald's. It's close by. He can walk there. They pay $9 an hour. And I said, well, hell, I'll pay $15 an hour. I couldn't find anybody to clean this property, to rake the. I said, I'll pay him $15 an hour right now. Bring him tomorrow. And so we arranged it for several days later that mother would bring him with her car to my property. And that day at 9 o'clock in the morning, the time, no one came. At 10 o'clock, she calls me, and I said, so where's your son? You were bringing him. And she said, well, he wouldn't get out of bed. He couldn't wake up. He couldn't wake up. Now remember, this is mother. Mother said, my son graduated. It's been 9 months since he graduated. He hasn't had a job. He didn't sign up to go to college. He stays at home and plays video games. He couldn't get out of bed. It's attitude. It's out for $15 an hour. That's what they want to pay in Seattle as the national minimum wage. He won't take it because he's lazy. We have created in America this welfare class of people that, I don't know what motivates them. Maybe you throw them in the ocean, they would probably, I just don't feel like swimming today, I'll just drown. You know? They're almost that lazy. But I offer this kid a job paying much more money than McDonald's, and he won't even take it. And it's a simple job. Raking leaves, you know, and he won't even do that. Can't wake up. So I've seen this happen many, many, many times. They don't, their jobs are there, even simple jobs, you don't need much education. You don't need any education, just, you know, rake leaves, wash dishes, clean a house, and they won't do it. But it's really crazy. In America, we have these large illegal immigration issue. We have about estimated 10 or 12 million illegal immigrants living in America working. None of these people qualify for social welfare. The only way they can qualify in America, in our Constitution, if you are born in America, you are automatically an American citizen. And we have the situation we call anchor baby. So these Mexican immigrants come illegally, man and a woman. She is pregnant. They have the baby in America. The baby is an American citizen. And so in this way, the mother gets a little bit of social welfare. The man never qualifies for it. But most of the illegal immigrants qualify for nothing. No social welfare at all. But you know what they do? They work. They all get jobs. They work and they take the, frankly honest, they take the dirty, shitty jobs that the Americans are too lazy to do. Do you guys, any of you ever work in a restaurant where they clean the dishes? You know, in a big, big restaurant, cleaning dishes. Actually, when I was in university, I had a job. They had a big cafeteria, and I actually had the job. They put all the dishes, it's like 500 students eating. You think how many dishes? 500 students, and I'm in this room, all these dishes coming in on a belt, you know, steam, food. I did this job. Me, former senator. Now, you know, the only people who will do dishes are the illegal Mexicans, but they'll do the work. The Americans almost, not, many Americans just won't. They'd rather stay home and play video games than take a job cleaning dishes. And I've done this work. So, the minimum wage, it's completely, it will not work, it won't help at all. It sounds good, it sounds idealistic, but, you know, we're paying minimum wage now, and you can't get people to take the job, even the simple jobs. Big, long answer. Sorry. But I try, when I give these big, long answers, but I try and give you a lot of information. Okay? Yes, sir.
I was wondering, what is your opinion on the electoral system nowadays? Don't you think that the electoral college is kind of obsolete?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. You know, I talked about our elections, and 99.99% of all politicians in America are directly elected by the people, except for one. Who is it? The president. The president is not directly elected by the people. He's elected by the Electoral College. A lot of us question we should just get rid of the Electoral College because it's just not needed anymore. It's a really old, obscure. It's unneeded. I wish it would go away. I think we need to get rid of it. It's just not needed. It's a very antiquated piece of our history that, for a variety of reasons, we've been unable to get rid of it. That's my answer. Yes?
I have a question concerning the elections. And you said that the frustration is one of the primary reasons why such candidates as Sanders and Trump emerged. But do you think that Trump, in this case, offers a solution for those frustrated people?
Not exactly. Does Donald Trump offer a solution or answer for the people frustrated with Washington? Not really. He's not offered anything specific. He just expresses the rage and anger.
He offered something simple, right? Let's kick out the Mexicans that are the reason why you don't have a job, right? But
yeah,
it's not exactly a good reason.
it's really not an answer. I know. But he somehow has, we say tapped into these people and how they feel. And they think he's the guy, even though he really hasn't offered it. And I have to be really cold-hearted and honest. It doesn't matter who's elected president of the United States. That system with all the lobbyists and the bureaucrats, it's like the world, if you're the world's largest ship, like a super tanker, a big aircraft carrier, it's very difficult to make this thing turn. I encourage, you're the biggest guy in here. This apartment building here, please go and pick it up. Show us. You want to be president, go pick up the apartment building and turn it around. Well, we're waiting. This is what it's like to be president in charge of the national government. It's like trying to pick up this. It really is. It's really almost impossible for any one man to change everything quickly. Even in you only get 2 terms. You get 8 years maximum. Even in 8 years, you can only do so much. Many of these corporate lobbyists and it's not just lobbyists for big companies, lobbyists for unions and teachers, all kinds of things. Many of these lobby groups, they want to keep things just the way they are. They don't want change. They're making money just the way that things are right now. They don't want your stinking change, Mr. Trump. They don't like, you're frustrated with Washington? I'm not. I'm making $500,000 a year in Washington. I'm not frustrated. So if you're one of the insiders, you're pretty damn happy with the way things are. You don't want change. So it's difficult it's the same as trying to pick up the apartment building and turn it. In theory, if we gave you, big hammer, sledgehammer, the Berlin Wall, you remember Berlin Wall? You see the YouTube video, they take hammer, smash, eventually they knock down the wall with hammers. Eventually, maybe we give you 5 years with one hammer, you can probably knock down that building. But that's like trying to change water. It's not simple. And there are people who are fighting opposed to the change. Not just the other party, the opposition party, but lobbyists and many other people like things just the way they are. Any ladies? Give me a question. Back to you.
Yes, do you think money is speech? Do you think money is speech?
Money, yeah. Do I think money is speech? Ooh, you asked a really tough question. You're a mean guy. The Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court has defined money and giving of money to political candidates as speech. In a recent Supreme Court decision called Citizens United, this was about 4 or 5 years ago.
2009.
2009? That far? 7 years ago. Time flies. In the Citizens United case, the U.S. Supreme Court decided not only can the citizen give money to a politician for his election as speech, we also say a corporation or labor union or NGO also has the right to give money as part of the freedom of speech. I'm not sure I agree with that decision. I think we have too much money in America. I absolutely think we have too much money. Even all the members of Congress, all the politicians agree there's too much money being spent on politics. But we have all these Supreme Court decisions that say it's part of freedom of speech. So we have to change our Constitution to cut off the money. And a lot of us, probably a majority of Americans, would like to do that. But it's difficult to change the American Constitution. But I guess I don't like the idea. I'm not saying I hope it. I have a great bad feeling in my body that I know we're spending way too much money on speech. But yeah. So, questions, ladies, come on. The guys are asking. Ah, good, lady.
How do you think Donald Trump would take care of foreign policies? And if he would become president, do you think America would get more enemies from your enemies?
Well, the first thing, okay, Donald Trump and foreign policy. So, the first thing you guys should all know this, when you're thinking about America, not just this election, but the next one, the Democrats and Republicans, they fight and disagree mostly on domestic policy, education funding, highway, how much to spend, domestic policy issues. The two parties disagree and fight a lot. On foreign policy issues, the two parties, they talk stuff on each other. After the election, they are 95% the same. Democrat, Republican. On foreign policy, they're mostly pretty. During election time, they talk stuff on each other. You know, they act like they disagree, but after the election, they're pretty much the same. The U.S. commitment to NATO and to NATO will be the same under Trump or Clinton. The Republican Party is a bit skeptical, not skeptical of the EU. I think the EU, the idea, the concept of the EU is a wonderful idea. Brussels they have too many regulations, too many bureaucrats making stupid regulations. They're just like Washington. And I know a lot of European people are frustrated with Brussels. So the Republican Party is probably, it's not a big issue for us because it's not our capital, it's not our continent. But the Republican Party is a little kind of sort of frustrated with Brussels. You know, they would agree that Brussels makes too many regulations, too much bureaucracy, but they're not going to change the relationship. I will say some changes in U.S. foreign policy, bit by bit, gradually, we have to focus more on China. Our top two foreign policy issues for the next 10 years, maybe, are going to be China and terrorism. How to fight, how to deal with terrorism, how to deal with China. It's not dealing with China on like war. It's, you know, the Chinese people are very competitive. We all know this. They've grown their economy from nothing 40 years ago to #2 just in 40 years. The only people that come close to that increase are the Poles. So, but we Americans we've 250 years, we've never had a country like the China. We've never had anybody compete with us economically like China is. We had Japan as a competitor, but they're a very small, little nation that have no natural resources. Yeah, we have the EU, but the EU is kind of fractured, and you know. But we've never had someone like the Chinese as a competitor. There's more of them. We have 300 million, they have 1 billion people. They have a lot of natural resources, not a lot, but they have natural resources to work with. They work hard. I've been in China. They work hard. They really value education. So I view them as a very formidable economic competitor for the U.S. So our foreign policy the next decade will be focused on how do we deal with China and how do we deal with global terrorism. After that, you know, I think that the American commitment to the Europeans is very strong still. You know, in America, if you're Caucasian, if you're a white person, you're descended from someone in Europe. My ancestors came from north part of Switzerland. So, you know, there's a lot of Polish population, and Polish Americans, German Americans, Irish Americans. You know, so the American, we know deep down that you are our long-lost cousins. So I don't see America walking away from Europe. It's just that we need to focus on China and this radical terrorism issue. And both of these we don't have exactly a solution. In China, you know, there's no one solution. It's just we have to evolve ourselves and become more competitive. It's like football. You know, America has been the dominant football team for 50 years. Well, now there's another team that's big and competitive. We need to, as we say in our American slang, we need to up our game. We need to be better footballers to keep ahead of the Chinese footballers. And the radical terrorism issues, we don't really have a solution for that one. Sorry. You know, that's so difficult to manage, and we've tried kind of two styles. Obviously, we've tried the war invasion, bomb destroying method with George Bush. Before that, and during Barack Obama, we've tried, trying to push democracy into the Middle East. We've tried to push democracy in Iraq and Libya and many places. And I think, in retrospect, we pushed too hard, too fast for democracy. We pushed for democracy in Eastern Europe, and it worked. It worked here. It worked for Poland, democracy, openness and transparent, glasnost and all those kinds of things. But it hasn't worked in the Middle East. And I think we pushed too hard, too fast. So, yeah. Questions? I think we're at it. There must be free beer someplace. Where's the free beer? I'm going to. Question?
What do you think about Donald Trump as a chief of the military? Because I heard in one of the interviews that, well, once he is the president, he would revive the tradition of these controversial interrogation methods, for example, like waterboarding, even though most of the people, I guess, in the office would disagree with him. He would like enforce to come back to these methods. What do you think about it? Is it a real threat, or what do you think about these methods? Are they good or not? Or, what's your stance on that?
If Trump's president, I don't know if he would use waterboarding or not. I think it's kind of, in the greater scheme of things, I think waterboarding is, it sounds terrible, but it's really pretty minor. Of all the prisoners and interrogations the American military or the CIA has ever done, probably 0.1% was waterboarding. The other 99.9% of interrogations were some other method, not so angry or mean. So, but waterboarding sounds like it is. It's a form of torture. I think it's kind of overblown, over exaggerated, that we really use it that much, or that we're going to use it, or that it even works. I think we have found better methods. We have these guys in Cuba, Guantanamo. You guys know the prison in Guantanamo? I personally, this is my own personal opinion, you didn't ask, but I'm going to. I think we should take all those guys, put them on an airplane, take them back, and just leave them in Syria. It costs us an incredible amount, because the U.S. military is the most inefficient bureaucracy in the world. It costs us a huge amount of money to keep 50 guys in Guantanamo, and we're not getting anything more out of these guys. So I say, screw it, put them on an airplane, take them to, the problem is none of these other countries will allow us to bring these guys back. These other countries say, no, you can't bring this idiot back to our country. We don't want him. We won't give you rights to bring him back. That's probably the biggest sticky point. Is I think all of our military, CIA, all these guys say, we can't waterboard, we can't do anything to these guys. They won't say anything in Guantanamo. So my opinion is just take them back, drop them off in Syria, and move on.
For example, we had an American base in Poland, in State, right? And right now, I think we are in charge, and we have to pay as a Polish government to the victims, kind of a restitution or some kind of money for allowing American soldiers, American agents to interrogate them in not really human way on the territory of Poland. So we actually, as a nation, have to pay for American policies. So may I ask?
I've never heard of this. This is unknown to me.
The article on the Economist from the last year, and I think in Poland it's a kind of
I'm sorry, I've never heard of this situation at all, that we had interrogations over here that you guys have.
So we are kind of responsible for allowing.
So you read this in The Economist?
Yes.
I wonder why it's not published anywhere else.
Right. No. I thought it's like a good source for information.
I've never heard of this at all, so I can't. Sorry, I can't comment. And it just sounds like pretty crazy to me. That's why I question the source, The Economist. Maybe they don't have their facts right. I don't know. I don't know. I never heard of this idea.
Actually, I can show you the link from the newspaper or no.
I would want the guy that wrote the story.
But there
That's what I
was
want.
a
That,
case-
no, let me. I want to talk to the guy that wrote the story, and I want to say, tell me your facts. Where are your sources? You wrote the story in The Economist. Show me your sources. That's what I would want, because it just sounds crazy to me.
No, it's just that, but there was a case in Strasbourg because of that, so it must be true.
Okay. I've never heard of it. It didn't make the American media. Or if it did, I didn't hear about it. Sorry. But the case was about American agents torturing someone in Poland.
Yes.
And where was this guy from?
The CIA used all sorts of countries to do this, because they couldn't do it in the US. It's very
Okay.
well known.
But where was this person, the guy being tortured? Where was he? Was he someone from the Middle East or
I
what?
think it was Caleb.
Okay. Okay.
Alleged terrorists who not really were terrorists as they discovered after all. So this is why we have to pay money for them.
Okay.
But is it the case the way that the Americans told Polish government that they would use the interrogation techniques or whatever, and the Polish government pretended not to know that? Isn't that the
Yeah, I
clue
think
of
we
the
also
case?
got the money. We got like $2 million for not paying attention what Americans do there. But it is controversial.
You would all be surprised, perhaps, how often this kind of stuff goes on amongst governments. You may not like it, but a lot of these things happen amongst governments, probably more than you think, or know, more than I know. And I'm not saying it's right or good that these things happen. So I don't know this incident myself, but I know when in 2013, I was in Berlin teaching, I was a Fulbright Fellow in Berlin teaching a class, and I landed on the airplane in September, and it had just come to the newspapers, the fact that the American, the NSA, National Security Agency, was listening in on telephone calls of many people in Europe, including Angela Merkel, who were apparently listening. And I landed in Germany 2 days later, and immediately students, your NSA is, spying on our channel, And I was like, sorry, I'm not the NSA, I didn't know about this. But, as time went by, a few weeks or a month later, the next news story was in Der Spiegel, was, and by the way, our German spy agency was helping the Americans. And then it came out a little bit later, and by the way, in Munich, Germany, we're bitching about the Americans, but in Munich every year we host the global conference for all the spy chiefs, for all the chiefs of all the Western spies. They all have an annual conference in Munich, and of course the Germans they were wondering, your NSA is spying on us, but of course we have this conference where all the spies come and tell each other how to be better spies. There's always more, sometimes there's more about these things than we know. And I just remember learning, being in Germany, and first, I myself was learning just the same as the Germans about the NSA situation. The situation you talk about, I've never heard about until just now. And I would just say, again, these are both examples. The government, spy agencies, and these guys all work together. We don't work together with the Russians so much. Occasionally we actually do, but these spy agency people, they're not a world government, but the fact that they all have a big annual conference in Munich, and it's not like North Korea is not invited. I don't think China's in, but all the European countries, all the North, it's a lot of countries, like 25 different countries, kind of all the Westernish countries have this annual spy conference. Have you guys ever heard of the 5 Eyes, 7 Eyes, 12 Eyes? Have you guys ever heard of this one? Google, write it down, 5 Eyes, 5 Eyes. Wikipedia, start with them. So the 5, and this is a kind of a networking thing. It's not social network, it's not Facebook, but it's the networks of the spy agencies. The 5 Eyes are the English speakers. It's the Americans, the Brits, the Canadians, Australia, New Zealand. And our 5, 8, they're not like they're brothers, but they work closely together. And it's true, I mean, the Americans, we all consider the British are our best allies along with Israel. So we have the 5 Eyes, and then you include it to the 7 or 9, I think it's called the 9 Eyes. And then we include in that the French, Germans are not. Germans are not in the second tier. They're in the third tier. It's like the Belgians, the French, and some other European countries, maybe Japan. And then there's the next tier. You know, it's like the cool kids and the kind of cool, and then you're only sort of cool. The Germans, I think they're always like I'm sure the Germans are. Yeah, we should be up there. We're the fourth largest economy, but no, you're down here. Sorry. And it's Google it, man. It's there, and it gives you. Since you seem interested in some of this kind of thing, you should look at that, because these spy agents, they all kind of work together one way or another. I'll tell you another story. Do you remember the Russians in Russia? They had that terrorist incident about 15 years ago. Some theater. There was a theater, maybe a live theater performance, and a bunch of Chechen rebels. Dubrovka. They took over. They held hostage like 200 people that were watching the theater show, and ultimately the Russian Secret Service stormed. A bunch of people died, and all the terrorists were killed. But the Americans actually, at least allegedly, we tried to help give some information to the Russians so they could, because it was on Muslim terrorist incidents. I know for a fact that the American government tries to quietly help the Russians, because we're trying to, even though we're not liking each other, we also try and help each other a little bit. And so this spy agency stuff is just hard to understand. Sorry. Oh,
I think they want to.
Okay. Boss says one more question. So who has a question? Who has the last question? Make it good. Man or woman? You're it.
So I'm interested, how would you rate Barack Obama's presidency? And do you consider him as a successful president?
Yes, I'm a Republican. How am I supposed to answer that question? Officially?
That's what I was
When he started, you were a Democrat.
Ooh. Checkmate. I voted for Barack Obama the first time. I was still Democrat then. And at that time, and for some years, I guess even still today, what he does represent, America is a country with a Constitution. Who wrote the Constitution? Women? Black guys? White guys? Who basically runs most of the major corporations in America? White guys. If you look at the U.S. Senate, it's mostly white. It's some women and a few non-whites. It's mostly white guys. And America presents herself to the world. We are the land of opportunity. Anybody can come here and be anything you want to be. And I know there's been some doubts from the world, thinking, we're not sure about you. You say that, America. Is it really true? Barack Obama proved it. He's black. He's not white. We do make the joke he's a black on the outside and white on the inside because he's genetically black, but his mother was white. His father ran off, or they don't even know where his father's at. His father ran, baby, and ran away. The mother is white. In fact, mother had a Kansas connection. Her parents lived in Kansas. Barack Obama never did. He was raised mostly by his mother's parents lived in Hawaii, and they raised him, and they were white. And he grew up in Hawaii. Hawaii was just a very different state. Hawaii is the most ethnically mixed state of all, and it's paradise because it never snows, it's never cold in Hawaii. So, but he proved to the world that America, anybody can still make it there. You don't have to be a white man to make it in America. You can be president. He also proved, we Americans, back on social welfare, we have single moms. They get pregnant, the guy runs off, and she's left alone to raise this child. Many times in the U.S., probably they're going to be probably kind of poor. It's very difficult to be single mom these days. Barack Obama had single, and a lot of the kids from those, they don't always turn out so well. Some do very well. Barack Obama was basically a single parent household. Not even after a while, his mother went away. When he was like 13, 14, his mother went away. Can you imagine that as a child? You don't even really know your father, and then your mother leaves too? Can you imagine what that does to the mind of a 13-year-old child? But this guy became president. So, if nothing else, he proved to the world it's still despite all of our problems we have in our country, it's still a very open system. You can come here with no fame, no money, you can become the president. They say, some people, America's racist. Barack Obama's black, he got elected, So 2 times. So that's the best thing he did for our country, is it showed the message to the world, we are still an open system. You can come here. It is a constitutional system and an economic system. You can still come here and become somebody famous if you want to, if you try really hard. So that's the best thing he did, in my opinion. They have got spending a little under control, the overspending of the national government. They spent too much money. It's still going, the spending was getting bigger and bigger every year. It still is, but at a smaller rate of increase. I'll give him some credit for that. His health care reform didn't really work out. We call it Obamacare. That's the slang name for it. It mandated people to buy health insurance. So a lot of Democrats, well, we got health insurance for all these people. Well, yeah, because you passed a law that made them buy it, okay? I made a law, you will buy this water for 50 zlotys. 50 zlotys a bottle. You will buy it. Health insurance in America is really freaking expensive. We have a really bad system. And Obamacare requires people to buy really expensive health insurance. So I should just make a law. You will buy this for 50 zloty. Well, it's not really worth 50 zloty. You will buy it because that's what the law says. That's the criticism I have of Obamacare. It didn't really reform health insurance in America. It mandated people. It did a whole bunch of stuff that really didn't work very well. And the cost of health care in America just goes up every year. We're the most expensive healthcare system in the world, all industrialized nations. We're almost twice the price of anybody in Europe. And yet our people arguably are less healthy than you guys are. Mainly because of obesity. But, we have really healthy people, we have people with terrible health. And so the Obamacare system didn't, because it did not really reform the system to bring down the cost. But so I would say, in my opinion, that's probably his greatest failure. I know he meant well. Obama, when he came in, he knew, a couple things. One is that he's a lawyer by training. He never actually practiced law, but he went to law school. And lawyers, and American lawyers in some way, American lawyers that are in government have a very, I don't know, it's like they have a box on their head. They're not outside, they're not creative thinking very well. And Obama came in and he really didn't have that much experience when he got elected, more than Ted Cruz. But, and I think he decided, as the first black guy president, I can't take any big risks. I can't try, because I have to make things work. If I try really big ideas and they fail, the American people say, yep, that's it. It proves blacks can't do it. Let's never elect a black again. And I think Obama knew this. And he thought, I can't have any failures. So I can't take big chances. So I have to try, not big grand ideas, but small ideas. He could have done more on the healthcare reform, made it bigger, a bigger, more audacious reform. I suspect he was probably a bit afraid to try it. So, I don't blame him for thinking that way. Probably if I were the first black president, I would realize, I can't fuck up. I gotta make this work really well. That's what he thought. That's what he believed. And he didn't do bad. He didn't do great on domestic policy. But in the eyes of the world, America can elect a black man, and did it twice. And next up, I don't know if the woman will get elected this time. I'll tell you one more thing. Coming back to Hillary Clinton in this election. And this is a story about the right to vote. In our Constitution, when we started in 1776, the only people that could vote were wealthy white men, not poor white guys. You had to be a white guy that owned property, like land, farmland. You had the right to vote. Is that fair? Hell no, it's not fair. Is that equal? No, it's not equal. We say we're the land of equality and fairness. It wasn't very fair and equal for voting in 1776. But very soon, within the first few years, the Bill of Rights, they expanded the right to vote to include all white men, poor or rich. At that time, black people were considered slaves. They were not considered men, they were considered property, like an iPhone or an automobile, okay? That's how the legal definition. But after the American Civil War in 1865, 1866, I think, the right to vote was given to all men. Sorry, ladies. 1776 till 1866, we finally got to allowing all the men the right to vote, including the men that we thought a few years ago were property, were slaves. We gave them the right to vote, right? But not ladies. We don't need your vote. We don't need you. It took until 1920. That's modern times. My grandfather was alive in 1920, before women had their equalness, before women were given equality in voting to men. So what is the lesson for Hillary Clinton? What is the lesson for what kind of people are elected president? First is the white guys, and then we'll try another man who's black, but eventually, it's like the women will come last. I'm sorry, I don't mean this, it's not my opinion, I'm just saying our history for voting was women were last in line. I'm not saying it's right, it is not right, it's not correct. But women were the last ones to get the vote, so I don't know if Hillary will get elected or not, or if it's going to be a guy. I appreciate your time. This is a lot of fun for me. I get paid to come teach about America. I also learn when I come. You guys are teaching me with your questions. You're teaching me just by asking me stuff. And I appreciate, I love to learn. I love to travel. I love to visit foreign cultures. I'm very happy to be back in Poland. I just got to say, you guys are living in your country at one of the best possible times. You've had this 1,000-year history of being a people, but your country's been chopped up and moved around and different, invaded and destroyed, and the Polish people survived. But now you've had the best 20 years in the past 300 or 500 years, the best 20 years, and you're living in it. You're living in some of the best years your people have had in a long, long, long time. So be thankful for that. And like an American, think about the future. The future is yours. You can make it what you want. You can give up now, or you can make it anything you want. So I wish you well. I hope one of you will be the future president or prime minister. That's my parting comment when I give these speeches is I look around and I'm hoping member of parliament, future president, future famous entrepreneur, you can all be famous and successful. And I hope you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.